Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 128, recorded on July 28th, 2021. The Azure puts its gold in CloudKnox. Good evening, Jonathan and Peter. How's it going?
good evening.
Going well.
Welcome back, Jonathan. It's been a while. I hope you had a nice, lovely vacation.
I did. As I was saying earlier, I travelled to the top of Mount Olympus and returned from my arduous trial. Here I am.
Nice. Well, we've missed you the last few weeks, and the listeners have as well. Unfortunately, Ryan, though, is now gone on vacation, so it's just the merry-go-round of vacations where people just keep, coming and going all over the place. But some of us, came from a distance and recording from places like Hawaii or Utah when we're traveling, but not so much.
Yes, vacation does not stop me.
Yes,
in Hawaii.
Business trips to Utah don't stop me either, although the audio quality was terrible. So, pluses and minuses, I guess. Apologies for that. And back in episode 126, because it's pretty rough. Alrighty. Well, we have not a lot of news this week, but exciting news that it was dropped. So I actually like it better this way when there's not a lot of stories, but the stories are quality. That's always how I like it. First up, Jonathan, Salesforce has completed their $27.7 billion acquisition of Slack. Took only 8 months to close that acquisition because I'm sure the antitrust people were quite active. Interesting enough, they're going to integrate it apparently into the Salesforce Customer 360 product, which is a customer data platform introduced in 2018 to allow companies to connect Salesforce apps and maps to map teams and reconcile data sources across a whole organization. I don't really understand the connection there, but I hope someone does, because hopefully they don't kill Slack. That would be horrible, because I've tried to use Teams. It's not good.
Oh.
Interesting enough, I think Slack has actually struggled through pandemic, where companies like Zoom and Teams were able to get huge adoption during the pandemic. Slack, had relatively slow growth. I think pricing pressure as well as pressure from Teams impacted them pretty negatively throughout the pandemic, especially when you get it included in Office 365. And so if Salesforce's strategy is, well, we'll just include Slack in your Salesforce license, that's not a bad deal either, because almost every company is running Salesforce these days for something.
That's pretty good.
So hopefully we'll see some, when it's no longer the only product, maybe they'll be more willing to reduce some prices in Slack, because Slack is pretty costly.
I kind of wonder if Slack already had really high adoption before the pandemic already. I mean, people used it in Office, whereas they would not use Zoom, between meeting rooms in a building. So maybe it's just that they already had the customer base, and so there wasn't the growth opportunity for them.
Yeah, but I mean, if you had so many new customers running to Microsoft Teams or to Zoom or to other things, you would expect that some amount of that business would move to Slack too, because they were not using something prior, because they chose Teams and they chose Zoom for their solution instead of Slack. So, that's opportunities they've missed out on. And maybe there's good reasons why they missed out on those opportunities. I don't know.
I knew they're going to get acquired one of these days.
You just thought they weren't going to IPO first. So,
I didn't know.
But apparently it's been a terrible IPO for them, because they IPO'd in 2019 for $23 billion market cap, and then they got sold to Salesforce for 27.7. 2 years later, basically. That's not a lot of growth. So definitely.
I thought they IPO'd at like 15 billion.
Well, according to the article I stole this number from, it was 23 billion market cap.
I bet it closed. I bet it closed on day one that high.
That's possible. That's very, very possible. Well, I was curious to see what they do. Mark Baumhoff did have a quote here, which he says, "Together, we'll define the future of enterprise software, creating the digital HQ that enables every organization to deliver customer and employee success from anywhere." Ugh. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark, for that. I appreciate it. We'll give you a non-quote quote. That's how I love those. All right. Well, moving on to AWS and more interesting cloud news other than what happens in Slack. Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, customers can now assign IP prefixes to their EC2 instances. AWS VPCs now allow you to assign either an IPv4 or an IPv6 prefix to your EC2 instance, enabling you to scale and simplify the management of your container and networking applications that require multiple IP addresses on an instance. So before this release, you would have to get really large instances to get lots of IP addresses, and potentially you'd end up having to scale out more than you need to just to handle the IP needs. And so by being able to assign a prefix, you can now basically run way more VMs and it no longer requires a super large VM to do so. So this is a pretty nice feature overall, costing companies money for no good reason, something AWS doesn't like to do. And so they're saving you money if you're in that boat.
It's like a subnet on a box.
Basically.
That's awesome.
makes network appliances a lot easier to deploy. I mean, I know this is targeted at Kubernetes and IPs per service, but still, this is really useful all around. I mean, the IPv6 address is limited to only a /80. I mean, what are you going to do with 2 billion addresses on the machine?
On one box.
Yeah. You're gonna run 2 billion containers. That's what you're gonna do with it.
At some point in the future, people are gonna make fun of you for thinking that you would only need 2 billion IP addresses.
I don't know if it's 2 billion or not. I'm just. It's probably more. It's probably more than 2 billion. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, like the subnetting in IPv6 just blows my mind when you start doing the math, and you're like, yeah, I lost a lot. My calculator doesn't go that large. That's what happens quite often.
It's what is really nice though is now we're not IP restricted to only having one IP on these older instances. It's still limited to Nitro only, but still the smaller boxes you can only have one IP. So now you can have multiple, which is pretty useful.
Yeah, I see lots of use cases, lots of good networking use cases you mentioned as well. Lots of opportunities for this to get used. I'm surprised this took so long actually, but having a whole subnet to a single node is almost kind of blows my mind, and like the complexity of that. Like really, like I guess that's what we do. Used to do back in ESX days, but it kind of blows my mind and thinking it through. Like, oh, that's a lot of IPs and a lot of nodes on one box.
It's still not a huge number of IPs, especially for IPv4. I think it was a /28. So what's that? Like 16 addresses per. So for every address that you used to be able to assign to an instance, you can now assign a /28. So
right.
Even maybe you get 16, 32 addresses or something. Still, it's pretty.
Yeah, but I think on some of the larger instance types, you were getting, you could do up to 8 dedicated ENIs. I think it was. So 8 times 16, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So. And hopefully, it just gets rid of our need to do all the port mapping.
Yeah, that'd be ideal.
No surprise that this can't be exposed to the public interfaces. I don't think you can get chunks of 16 public IPs assigned to your instances, though. I think it's internal.
That'd be great.
That'd be awesome if you could.
Yeah, I'll have all of the public IPs, please. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing on my kind of wish list of things I wish Amazon would give us would be the ability to reserve contiguous blocks of IP addresses and just have them tied to my organization, and so I could just use them in my org, and I'd be willing to pay for that, even if they're not attached or attached. So.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah. Well, if you are in the serverless side of the world where you are doing a lot of work with serverless deployment pipelines and everything, one of the big challenges has always been how do you do it in a great CI/CD way? And so Amazon has built over time a bunch of best practices. And you can find all kinds of information on these at serverlessland.com, which is AWS's landing page for all things T2 serverless. But they have now added a new feature to the CLI, which is called AWS SAM Pipelines. This CLI command gives you access to the benefits of a CI/CD in minutes, such as accelerating deployment frequency, shortening the lead times for changes, and reducing your deployment errors. And it gives you a default pipeline template for popular CI/CD tools such as Jenkins, GitLab, GitHub Actions, and AWS Code Build /Code Pipeline that all follow the AWS best practices for deployments. All available to you immediately. And if you want to learn how to do this, they do have a full walkthrough on the Compute blog, as well as instructional videos, like I mentioned, over at serverlessland.com that you can check out.
Nice. I hope to see more of this kind of thing. It's been one of my mental blocks. I mean, I've been using serverless since Lambda was announced, but building it into a pipeline is such a chore, and Jenkins is such a chore in itself. So having a canned way to deploy a pipeline it's great.
Yeah, especially one that meets best practices and hopefully least privilege and meets a bunch of compliance check boxes. That's always a win to be able to get that just kind of easily out of the box. And I think for a lot of people, just starting out with Code Build, Code Pipeline is a good starting place. Getting into Jenkins, getting into GitHub Actions is ideal too. But if you don't have any of that infrastructure, just being able to directly plug into AWS tools is always helpful.
Are you working with any workloads right now that are based on SAM?
I am not currently, but I have in the past.
Yeah, I have not had any customer workloads on SAM yet, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's still pretty new. I mean, serverless is kind of the one that was the leader there for a while. SAM is kind of coming up. It's still playing feature catch up in my mind, but I think it's getting closer.
Yeah, they both had limitations and advantages, which is kind of hard to pick between them.
Yeah,
this may give them the edge finally.
Yeah.
I mean, having met the founder of serverless.com, that alone told me that I should not use his product. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he feels very strongly about his product and is not afraid to tell you why his product is awesome and at length. So, nice, but not my type of ego that I want to deal with on anything in this world. My days back in the Perl CPAN days have burned me from all egos in open source software.
Perl.
All right. Well, this is a great announcement from Amazon that a lot of you probably have custom code for. And so this is the new Amazon Route 53 Application Recovery Controller, which is a set of capabilities for Route 53 that continuously monitor an application's ability to recover from failures and controls application recoverability across multiple AWS AZ regions and on-premise environments to help you build apps that must deliver very high availability and low latency. One of the things that this thing does is it basically provides you a readiness check and then a routing control function. And the readiness check continuously monitors your AWS resource configurations, capacity, and network routing, and allows you to monitor for any changes. So things that it's checking for, like auto-scaling groups are configured properly, your service limits are configured properly across multiple regions, and load balancers, volumes, etc. And those are all available and ready for you to be able to fail over at a moment's notice. And if it doesn't have that, it'll alert you to say, hey, you have a problem you need to address. The routing controls help you rebalance traffic across application replicas during failures to ensure that applications stay available. And the routing controls work with Route 53 health checks to redirect traffic to the application replica via DNS. There are three, for all of you who wrote your own code for this, which is me, Jonathan, and Peter, and Ryan, if he was here. There's an improvement apparently to what we've built, which the traditional automated method has a couple of issues. The first one being routing controls. The routing controls that this now gives you a way to fail over the entire application stack based on application metrics or partial failures, such as a 5% increased error rate or a millisecond of increased latency. Second benefit of this over our code is routing controls give you safe and simple manual overrides and use them to shift traffic for maintenance purposes to recover from failures when your monitors fail to detect an issue. And the third benefit being routing controls can use a capability called safety rules to prevent common side effects associated with fully automated health checks, such as preventing failover to unprepared replica or flapping. Number 4, it's not written by Jonathan, Peter, Ryan, or myself, which is always a win. And the routing controls and checks can be added to existing infrastructure via CloudFormation on day one. So thank you for that. And then this is where it lets you down just a little bit. The readiness checks are relatively cheap, about 4.5 cents per hour or $32.40 a month. But for each cluster you're using, it's $2.50 an hour or $1,800 a month, which is a little bit on the steep side. Again, this may be we don't want everyone running to this day one pricing announcement, or this may be what they're going to do in the future. But $2,500 or $1,800 is a lot cheaper than all of our salaries combined. So maybe it's a savings for your organization. I can't really say one way or the other. This is a global service that can be used to monitor and control app recovery for apps, and it's running in any public commercial AWS region now.
I mean, it's awesome. I wonder how many people actually use it to do things automatically, though. I think I've seen a lot of fear, especially in enterprises, that building an automated failover system is prone to false alarms. Things, this one particular thing, the alert fails rather than the service fails, and all of a sudden you fail over, and it takes time to spin things up. And so oftentimes it seems like these things generate alerts which go to a NARC or a SRE team, and then the SRE team pushes the button finally to say, okay, we've double checked, now do the failover. I do like the checks for available capacity. That's great. If they can be smart enough to say, well, you're using this capacity in this region, you need the same capacity in another region, but we don't have it. That's certainly good to know before you start the failover.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, 2 things caught my eye with this. One would be they're kind of starting to integrate well architected into real-time monitoring, which is kind of neat. And then, but I don't see this as a DR recovery tool. Like, I would not implement this as part of a DR solution. I'd implement it as part of an HA solution.
Yeah, definitely. It's for highly available apps for sure, because these apps need to be somewhat running or able to run very quickly. So I wouldn't use this for DR, but I think again, HA, active architectures, etc. This is a great solution for that,
because it's got to be automated. It's got to be automated.
I think the big reason why companies shy away from it, though, is that that third reason where automated health checks are sometimes too error prone. or that you have flapping issues where you failed over to one region, then you failed back because the problem just keeps moving back and forth. That's why you want to do those validations. So the fact that they've kind of built in some safety rules for that, tells me that they understand that challenge, and that's one of the reasons why they built this. And then they actually get into, and I didn't summarize it here in the article, but they get into a lot of terminology that they're using, and you can actually define things as recoverable units. So like these things together are a unit of recoverability I want to have, and so you can kind of break your app into multiple units, or what they call cells in this case, and then you can group those together into a recruit, regroup, and a resource set, and basically then validate those things. So you can actually say, well, one cell is bad, but the overall app is fine. Don't fail over. And so those are those safety rules kind of play, and to kind of help avoid those false positives that you're talking about. So I think there's a lot of good stuff here. I think this will get some more feature enhancements over the next few months, but great day one feature. Yeah. Super like this one, especially CloudFormation support.
Yeah, breaking apps down into cells is really useful, because I think the number of conversations I must have had over the past 5 or 6 years about, or do we fail over the whole stack, or do we just fail over these small components? Why fail over Lambda if it's only EC2 that's got a problem? That kind of thing. So the ability to break that down into smaller components and fail individual components over, that will probably bring around some architectural changes. But awesome. How great. I mean, it's got to be great for everybody, really.
Yeah, it also forces you to define those items, which makes you think through how things are going to fail over, or how they should. I bet going through the process of configuring that, many teams will start disagreeing on what a cell is in their architecture.
Well, and the nice thing is they give you some good guidelines, right? If it's not an independently runnable service, it's not a unit. And so if I have a dependency on another service, then that's not a unit I can fail over in that method. It's not a shared resource. And so you have to think about that differently. And I think it's a good terminology, good vocabulary just to learn in general, that I think you can apply to a lot of architectural conversations about HA in particular, which is a difficult topic.
Does that make the concept of microservices sort of fade away a little bit, though? I mean, we wouldn't want to fail over necessarily a single microservice in that case if it's not it's a single operable unit. But at the same time, maybe it becomes part of the application architecture, but not part of the deployment architecture. Maybe we sort of start drawing new lines.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, microservices, when you really look at how they are defined, they're supposed to be completely, isolated units. If you're in a situation where you go into, from an API gateway into a microservice and then calls 6 other microservices, you've sort of failed at microservices at that point. And so, I think there are a lot of bad practices I've seen in microservices where people have not quite got that autonomous unit concept. Again, I think there's a lot of education in C and CF and cloud native architecture that we are still teaching developers, teaching operations people. And this is one of those areas where I think it just gives you one more toolbox to use in that discussion.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the Cloud Pod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
All right, moving on to GCP. So GCP every week typically releases what they call a sketch note. And we don't typically talk about them here as news because they're typically, it's just a diagram, kind of written in crayons, as I like to call them. Like, they're written in crayons, so you really get a good idea of what these things are. And so there's 2 this week that I thought I'd just quickly mention because I think they're helpful. The first one is a new Google's Kubernetes engine cartoon, which walks you through how Google's Kubernetes works, all the benefits of it, etc. And it's a quick, really easy way to compare what Google's Kubernetes engine can do and what the capabilities are and what the different terminology means in a very simple, digestible fashion. So that's the first one. And then they also released one for Data Fusion, which if Ryan was here, man, he'd be super happy because he and I both talked about Data Fusion. Like, I don't get it. Now I have a handy diagram that helps me get it so much better than I did before, which is always helpful. So these are definitely available to you on the GCP blog, and I recommend you subscribe to the blog just to get access to these, especially if you're doing a lot of stuff in GCP. We probably won't talk about them again here at the show for a while. Maybe we'll remind you again in the future. But these are great. Definitely check them out. I highly recommend them, and they're a great introduction to any of these services. All right. Well, last year, Google brought Windows to GKE, and now they're bringing GKE Windows to you with Anthos. So if you want to run your Windows Server containers via Anthos on VMware or in another on-premise environment, or even potentially another cloud provider like AWS or Azure, you can now do so. Bringing Windows support to their family of Kubernetes-based services with the same experience lets you modernize apps faster and achieve a consistent development and deployment experience across hybrid and cloud environments. Plus, by running these workloads side by side, you get operational consistency and efficiency. No need to have multiple teams specializing in different Kubernetes engines or platforms to manage your different workload. So Anthos is continuing to take over the world once again.
10K chunk at a time.
Yeah, not sure I could afford to run Windows
exactly.
and Anthos at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're probably Windows customers are their target market because they already have enough money to pay for the Windows licensing. You just, $10,000 is cheap to them.
Good point. I don't know. I see most people transforming their Windows apps, which are usually .NET apps, to move to .NET Core on Linux. So I don't see a ton of interest in this.
That's the more common path. Well, I mean, because everyone tried Windows containers and realized they're terrible, is what I hope. And so then they would say, well, if I can't do Windows containers, what do I go to next? And .NET Core is kind of the best option because you're not throwing away all that code you've already written for over years. There are limitations on .NET Core. It doesn't have some of the UI UX elements. So if your app has some dependencies there, there's still some modernization. Or if you're on an older version of .NET, you have to upgrade to at least 3.5. So even .NET Core transformations are somewhat complicated for some teams.
Yep.
Yeah, fonts of all things. How long have they been around for?
Yeah, it's just some weird choices of what they ripped out of .NET Core and put into .NET Core. It's just like, okay, I get why you did it, but you also killed backward compatibility, which was one of your big pretenses of why you should adopt .NET in the first place. So it's a little weird. But if you're doing .NET development and C# code in particular, I think .NET Core is a great option. Unless you're doing legacy .NET, then don't go there. Well, if you are doing enterprise data warehouse migrations, you know that one of the crucial steps in a data warehouse, database, or data lake migration project is data validation. And so this typically involves comparing structured and semi-structured data from the source and target tables and verify that they match after each migration step. Hopefully you're not doing this manually, or if you are, using something like Mechanical Turk to do it. But if you are using tooling, Google has your back with the new data validation tools. The tools use the IBIS framework to connect a large number of data sources, including BigQuery, Cloud Spanner, Cloud SQL, Teradata, and many, many more, including all of your favorite enterprise databases, to then compare the data and validate that the data going into the data warehouse matches what's in the source data, all through the power of machine learning and AI from
machine
Google.
learning and AI. Or hash algorithms, whatever.
Yeah.
Or whatever, how you define AI and ML, that's your call.
This is really useful. I was involved in a very large data migration from Oracle to SQL Server, of all things, a long time ago. And one of the biggest concerns, it was for sort of fairly mission critical data. And one of the biggest concerns was, oh, great, you say you can export these tables and you say you can move the data from here to here, but how can we be sure that everything arrives? And how can we be sure that all the references are still intact and it's still going to be effectively the same data set at the other end? I had to write all kinds of scripts to validate the data. So having this out of the box is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and SOC now requires that too. Like when you're moving systems in a SOC compliant environment, you have to prove the data is what it is from both locations, and you do a lot of checksumming of tables and all kinds of nastiness. So yeah, any type of tool that does this type of comparison in more real time is super helpful. Especially as you go to zero downtime migration strategies. You need something. All right. And our final Google story is about Looker. Looker, for those of you who don't know, is Google's far superior version of QuickSight. There are several new features available this week, all wrapped around traditional dashboards, which are no longer good enough for most businesses. But I don't know about that. Most companies are just excited to get any dashboard or any visibility into their data-driven business. And the new Looker features include the new Looker extension framework, which is part of the new Looker developer portal, which takes care of the tedious aspects of building a web app so that developers can focus on developing the data product itself. And with the new Looker development tools, it makes it easier to monetize your data, creating new and ongoing revenue streams. And so Google cannot be blamed for the data privacy violations. It's all on you. Looker is expanding their multi-cloud approach by now supporting the hosting on Microsoft Azure in addition to Google Cloud and AWS. So you can now make Looker look at all of your clouds. And by hosting a Looker on a cloud of your choice, organization can improve your performance, consolidate cloud deployments, or meet your compliance requirements and better fit analytics in their cloud strategy. In addition to that, they've also created several new feature sets to support a broad set of data experiences from modern BI to custom data applications, including capabilities such as API Explorer, which is an interactive way to explore the Looker API, prototype requests, and execute complex API calls without writing any code. So no code for Looker, always good.
No code for APIs. I love it.
Yeah. New filter components, which allow developers to bring the filters they declare on the dashboard in Looker into any embedded app or extension. The new cloud cost management solution, which offers an out-of-the-box, robust reporting and BI capability to get up and running quickly with transparency across the 3 major clouds. So this is a built-in Looker reporting dashboard for cost management, cloudability, and cloud health, and everybody, they should be scared. And then Looker mobile app, allowing everyone to get insights on the go on their mobile devices. And the app is available in 22 languages and supports biometric authentication like Face ID and Touch ID.
I remember us talking a year ago, or maybe even more than a year ago, when Azure were launching their sort of quick sites type. I don't remember what it's called now, but they also had a cost
Power BI, isn't it?
Yeah, it was some kind of cost. It was a cost management thing, and we said back then, wouldn't it be really advantageous for a cloud to be able to suck in data from the other clouds to do side by side comparisons and say, hey, look, this would have been cheap if you were running with us. To see Google come to market with this kind of thing first, though, is pretty interesting.
But I think Azure did release the ability to suck your AWS bill into their reporting, but they never did Google. At least I don't know of. And so they did that something.
And Google did AWS with BigQuery.
Yep.
There was some stuff for BigQuery with I think GDocs on top, right? With Sheets on top. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But this, having the Looker dashboards gives you much more powerful data visualizations than any of those tools would have given you. But, powered by BigQuery, that's always a win for that data set. So I know if I'm doing another cloud cost FinOps project, I'm going to be looking pretty hard at, BigQuery and Looker to do all that visualization work.
I wonder how long really visualization tools have to kind of live, and how long people are really going to care about those things. I mean, at what point do we stop having people looking at graphs and charts and alerts and monitoring, in this kind of format, and just kind of offload that to the AI and just have it send us alerts instead? Like, why do you need to pay a person to sit there and look at these things?
I don't know. Executives love pretty pictures, as long as that number, that chart's going up and to the right. So, for as long as we need to continue to make executives feel warm and fuzzy about their businesses, I think those will continue to exist. But you're right. The cognitive analysis of those charts, it will become more and more of an AI function over time. But there's still going to be people who want the chart for the bragging rights or board reports,
especially with regard to operations. System operations, SRE work. I mean, I could see a lot less need for humans to be watching those charts, but yeah, everyone's still going to want to see the sales and marketing charts.
Everyone loves to see that funnel of leads, right?
Yeah.
So. For listeners of the Cloud Pod, you know that I have no love for Microsoft Active Directory, which is why I'm excited to tell you about the leading cloud directory platform, JumpCloud. JumpCloud makes it easy to solve today's IT challenges by unifying device and user management through a single pane of glass, enabling you to securely manage your users and devices and perform common tasks like onboarding and offboarding remote workers. With JumpCloud, you no longer need to implement an on-premise Active Directory infrastructure or additional tooling to scope a user's access, and you can ensure that the user is coming from trusted devices and networks. Enabling JumpCloud's zero-trust solutions improves the security and compliance of your network, ensuring users have access only to the services they need when they need them. To start your organization's move to a modern, secure hybrid work model, try JumpCloud for free today at cloud.jumpcloud.com/thecloudpod. That's cloud.jumpcloud.com/thecloudpod. Moving on to Azure, Microsoft is doubling down on cybersecurity with the purchase of CloudKnox. CloudKnox, of course, is a platform designed to protect resources and identities across multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments. Terms of the deal were not disclosed, but Microsoft has said Azure customers will be able to right-size permissions and enforce least privileges principles, employing continuous analytics to help prevent security breaches. As organizations adopt hybrid work and deploy more cloud services, those entities then require access and permissions, and being able to dynamically use ML and AI capabilities to determine permissions, privileges, and entitlements helps you secure your environment much more cleanly. CloudKnox was founded originally in 2016 by former VMware engineers Balaji Parimi and Rao Charuki, and provide a service that leverages activity-based authorization APIs to detect and remediate overprivileged machines and users. They have about 58 employees and raised $22.8 million in venture capital up until the acquisition by Azure.
I have not seen CloudKnox in action at all. I don't know if you have.
Never heard of them, actually.
I saw some demos of their product, when they first launched, and it was interesting, but it was expensive. Was my take on it. I think it had potential to be really interesting and really valuable. But Azure is actually building a lot of these capabilities into their cloud natively. Least privilege access. Google's building that kind of stuff too. So I don't know if there was a long runway for them left to really get a lot of adoption, a lot of new customers, or if this is just going to get some replaced by the cloud providers over time, anyways, and ultimately not be needed.
Yep.
Well, Microsoft has quietly released their own Linux distribution. Yes, they released a Linux distribution, and Steve Ballmer might be eating his hat over it. I don't know.
How the tides have turned.
How the tides have turned. The new distro is called CBL Mariner, and that is an internal Linux distribution for Microsoft's cloud infrastructure and edge products and services, and was designed to provide a consistent platform for these devices and services and enhances Microsoft's ability to stay current on Linux updates. CBL Mariner, the CBL stands for Common Base Linux, and it's a mixture of the new GPL and MIT licensing. Ballmer, of course, famously said in 2001 that Linux is cancer, and although he did back away from that in 2016, he is still well known for his hatred of the Linux operating system.
What does consistent platform for these devices mean? Does it mean more reliable?
I mean, that's how I interpret it as like, oh, so you're admitting that Windows boxes are not always consistent, even on the same hardware. It's sort of weird terminology that you're using. But the other thing I was thinking about edge devices. A lot of them are running, very low end ARM CPUs that can't even run Windows, let alone, they can barely run Linux. So by giving you a very common Linux operating system for IoT, you get a much smaller package without having to now, compromise on the Windows kernel.
Especially with Windows 11, now they're requiring a TPM. What on earth?
Yeah, I know.
What
I saw that.
Honestly.
I remember when the rumor was that they were never going to do anything after Windows 10, and we were just going to get feature updates to Windows 10. And then all of a sudden now we have Windows 11. And I'm like, really? Like, why muddy the waters?
Maybe they didn't include enough ways.
It is good that they stopped. If they're going to stop somewhere, though, they can't stop at 10. They got to go to 11. Right?
Crank it up to 11.
So for 11, they're saying that the majority of Windows 10 boxes won't actually be able to run Windows 11. And then if you've actually seen screenshots of Windows 11, you know that it's a complete ripoff of Mac OS.
There you go.
Like they literally stole the dock on Mac OS and put it on Windows 11. Like they took the start bar and just centered it. And you're like, oh, you guys were, you could sort of wave your hands and say, well, that's just a natural evolution of start. And now you're like, no, you're just blatantly ripping off Apple.
It's hilarious to see. Like we talk about how the tides have turned, but to think about the guys at Xerox who built the first GUIs and how, Apple pretty much ripped that off.
Yeah,
it's like really?
Oh, yeah.
They've come around full circle now. We're back to like early 1980s in terms of what the GUI looks and operates like. It's just insane.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested in running this new fancy Microsoft Linux distribution, I will tell you it's not exactly easy to do. It is open source. You can go find the source code out on GitHub under the CBL-Mariner GitHub repo. But to do this, you'll actually have to use another version of Linux to actually build it, because there's no ISO for this. So you'll need to deploy something like Ubuntu. Then go run a bunch of commands that are out there on the internet in this linked article that will basically help you set up a dedicated boot volume that will be this Microsoft Linux, and then you can create a VHD file which you can then turn into any type of VMware or virtualization level host that you want to do, and then you can play with it all you want to. I personally am going to wait until it's a container that I can just download and not have to deal with any of that noise. But if you're really interested in this and you really want to see what Microsoft's done to Linux, you can go do that right now with this very complicated set of steps using Ubuntu to get to Microsoft Linux, which is already a fail.
I mean, the name just rolls off the tongue. If it's as good as its name, then yay.
Yeah, CBL Mariner. Yeah, I was like,
sounds like
Actually, the first article that I read about this didn't even tell you what CBL stood for. It was until I got to the second article that they actually mentioned the CBL is the common base Linux. Which I was like, well, that's great marketing for you right there.
I mean, it sounds like an oil rig or something.
It reminds me of 2010 when we had to do pivot root to get persistent boot volumes on EC2.
Yeah, I remember that too. Any type of non-native supported OS was always a nightmare to get onto Linux EC2 originally. All right, well, that is it for new news this week, other than the lightning round, Peter. And from Hawaii, take us away.
Azure Active Directory support for Azure Relay is now in public preview.
I mean, a service that provides you basically zero trust access that relays data to AD may need to support Azure ADs. I don't understand. What do you mean?
Oh, that team certainly didn't drop the baton.
Yeah.
Not at all.
AppLovin builds on Google Cloud to transform mobile marketing.
That's a super bad pun. Just terrible.
Dun, 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 dun. AppLovin it.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I like that.
We're going to get sued by McDonald's now.
Yeah. You did it a little different. Instead, you're going to get sued by McDowell's.
We're going to call it satire and we're going to move on.
Amazon Textract announces specialized support for automated processing of invoices and receipts.
Which makes you wonder, what did it do before? Why does that have to be so specialized? I thought it was MLAI that just learned. Apparently not learning so well.
All the zeros were O's. It just screwed up all the spreadsheets.
Yes, that is ML, not AI. That is what that is.
Yes.
Amazon Kendra releases WorkDocs connector, what we've all been waiting for.
And the WorkDocs GM is now terrified that they're actually going to find out how little WorkDocs is actually used.
Easily enable AWS config recording and deploy conformance packs across your organization using quick setup.
I mean, who doesn't love pushing things down in your organization from config? I mean, just one more way that you can bury Jonathan in troubleshooting.
That's actually where I've been for the past 4 or 5 weeks.
Trying to figure out conformance packs.
Yeah,
and
SCPs.
Oh, goodness. Announcing the general availability of AWS Local Zone in Denver.
Yay. Another local zone. This one also is tied back to US West 2, so not to US East 1.
Oh, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Since we figured out that only certain, the Ohio region is not going to host any of these.
Amazon releases Virtual Andon 2.2, which I knew nothing about, but apparently is a digital notification system for manufacturers.
You knew nothing about it because when they announced Virtual Andon 1.0, I was super excited about it because I the Andon core is such a great DevOps story and all that. And then they wasted it on manufacturing, which is where it actually came from. But it could have been used in change management. It could have been used in, their chaos stuff. There's so many cool things they could have done with Andon, and they use it for manufacturing, unfortunately. But so if you're in the manufacturing space on AWS, the Virtual Andon 2.2 is pretty cool, but they wasted the name on something simple like this.
Well, they can keep their hands off my manufacturing.
Nice.
AWS Snowball now supports multicast streams and routing by providing instances with direct access to external networks.
Because no better way to exfiltrate your data, but directly from the Snowball where you just put it all. Perfect.
Yeah. It could only get worse.
How could it be worse? AWS Snowcone now supports multicast streams and routing by providing instances with direct access to external networks. Hopefully that doesn't sound too familiar. But
I mean, now you can do half the data over the same exfiltration
path. But
path.
very slowly.
Perfect.
Yes.
But very slowly. Yes.
Very slowly. That is it. That is it for today's round. The winner is... da, 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 da.
Nice. As soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, he's got it. And the virtual Andon one was pretty good too.
Yeah.
I succeed both of those to Jonathan quite nicely. But you mentioned relaying, which it takes me back to the Olympics that are happening right now. And I don't know about you guys, but have you realized that the Olympics are going on at all?
Yeah, I have. I mean, what?
It's such a terrible, terrible experience. The fact that everything happened 16 hours before we are awake, and then I basically wake up and I know everything that already happened in the Olympics that mattered. So there's no reason to watch it on TV. And then the whole NBC online experience is terrible. Just a little side 2 cents on the Olympics right now. But it's overall just been a kind of disappointing event.
Yeah,
I think.
We're kind of a gymnastics family. We've been following gymnastics for a long time. And it must be so weird for the competitors to be in these huge arenas, which were designed for 100,000 people. And the only people clapping for them are their teammates. It's just really, really, really weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like it would take a little bit of the pressure off, still just feel like just another college meet where nobody showed up?
Maybe, but also I think there's, you do something really awesome and the crowd cheers for you, and you kind of get pumped by the crowd as well. So I imagine it's for some who are very, already nervous or have a little bit of stage fright, maybe it's helpful for them. But I would imagine for athletes who are super extroverted, it's not great.
And whether they feel the same reward at the end of it, and not having even been cheered by a crowd the whole time, would be a little disappointing.
Yeah, you see a score and they're like 14.3, and you're like, "What's it?" The commentators are like, "That's an amazing score," and like, there's nothing happening in the building. No one's excited. Yeah, a
little strange. Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't bail on it actually, or push it out another year or something else. It's.
I mean, if they push it out another year, they would be right on top of the Winter Olympics, which are coming up right in February. So you're going to wrap up the summer now, and then we go into Winter Olympics in February, because they were originally scheduled for 2022. But of course, they're in China, so then there's a bunch of, do we boycott them, and a bunch of things that are going on.
It's almost like they could just have cancelled it, and the world would have carried on turning and working just the same. It's a sporting event. It's not.
Yeah, but then the IOC would be in trouble, because how do they convince cities to spend billions of dollars on infrastructure they use for 2 weeks if they can't, if the event could be canceled?
Yeah, I know Japan did spend a lot of money, but at least they got to reuse a lot of their previous venues. So,
yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm like, why don't you guys just build, an Olympics village in some place that's not themed, not branded, and then you basically, when you rotate the host country, you just have the host country come and decorate it and do all the performances. Because really, at the end of the day, the only differences between the events are, the opening, closing ceremonies are very localized to the company, to the country, and then like on some of the courses they're unique, but you could make them, bulldoze the half pipe and build new half pipes every 4 years. That's no big deal. Like, the amount of money they're asking people to spend is just ridiculous, and the benefit isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just it's a huge tourist draw, those countries. So it's supposed to be a net benefit.
It's not going
Japan,
so well for Japan this year, that reinvestment.
Usually a huge tourist draw, but I mean, you could always move it back to Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go back to its homeland. It's perfect. All right. Well, other things that are coming up other than the Olympics, which will be almost over by the time this drops, but the Amazon Summit, of course, is coming up still in August, 24th, against the AWS Reinforce conference, again, because Amazon didn't have confidence in Reinforce pulling the crowds, so they're combining it with the summit. And then reInvent, of course, on November 29th through December 3rd. And Google Cloud Next, we have an update. Registration is now open for the virtual Google Cloud Next event, October 12th through the 14th. So it sounds like Google has bailed out on doing an in-person conference once again. I think that is purely driven by Delta variant and the unknowns of the Delta variant. And
they might be the ones that are ahead of the game here. We'll see.
Yeah, they may be. We'll still see if if reInvent happens, or Reinforce as well. But I imagine coming into August, you only have a couple months for people to buy airfare and to get there. I think it was just not a tenable solution for Google at this point, and I applaud them for that. I think it's a good call. But again, I'm glad it's going to be only 2 days versus the 18 weeks of Google Cloud Next that we had last time, which was just ridiculous. So there you go. And that is it for things coming up. Do go register for Google Cloud Next if you want to. I registered yesterday, as I put it into the show notes, because it's free. So go enjoy the Google Cloud as it goes. We'll see you next week here in the Cloud Pod.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
And that is the Week in the Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Foghorn Consulting and JumpCloud. Check out our website, the home of the Cloud Pod, where you can join our newsletter, Slack team, and send feedback or ask questions at thecloudpod.net, or tweet us with the hashtag #thecloudpod.